Welcome into the show, everyone. My guest today has rum in his blood, literally. He bears the most famous surname in the spirits world, but he has chosen to stake his claim with the oldest, most mysterious, and perhaps one of the most respected names in Puerto Rican rum. He's the sales and marketing director of Ron del Barrilito, the guardians of the famous Hacienda Santa Ana, and the creators of what many call the cognac of the Caribbean. From the secrets of the Freedom Barrel to the truth about the legendary 3-star blend, please welcome Eduardo J. Bacardi. Welcome in, Eduardo. How are you?
Hi, Arthur. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Great to have you, man. I was very excited to see you as one of the potential guests, thanks to Laura, of course, and putting us together. So little secret, I have tried your brand well before I knew I ever even had you on the show or even thought about interviewing you. Very big fan of everything you do. So for those at home, go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're from and what you do.
Yeah, great. So I'm Eduardo. I live down here in beautiful Puerto Rico. I work here at the Hacienda Santa Ana, like Arthur mentioned, working with Ron del Barrilito. We have titles here, but we're small enough that we kind of do a little bit of everything. So I help out with what is sales strategy, distributor management, marketing. We have our visitor center here, which we'll talk a little bit about. And yeah, we've been with the brand for almost 10 years now, growing at a pretty quick pace. And like we like to call it, it's a 150-year-old startup that we're just getting started with, even though it has over, a decade and a half of history. So, sorry, a century and a half of history. Yeah,
Oh.
I forgot a zero there. So,
hey, it's Monday. It's still, we're still getting to the run of it. So, 100-year startup. That is the first I've ever heard this, but that makes a lot of sense, right? You guys have kind of developed through the scene in a very crowded market and crowded industry, but I love your product. Obviously, we already talked about it. Your name kind of carries a lot of weight. Was rum and the spirit industry always something in your future, like from the get, or was this something you're like, begrudgingly, I'll follow in these footsteps? How did you end up in this path?
well, look, you're right. It's always been a part of my past, whether I wanted to or not. I come from a big rum making family, which a lot of people may have heard of. And again, I'm a sixth generation family member of the Bacardi family.
Mhm.
And, it was always going to be in my future. I felt one way, shape, or form, it was going to be there. Did I think it was going to be working with Ron de Barrilito in a very small niche, a drop in the bucket brand compared to Bacardi? No, but here I am, and I'm really honored to do so. I think it pays homage to my family, whether it's the roots, whether it's the industry, whether it's Puerto Rico in general, and very excited to be working here, especially alongside some other of my family members.
Yeah, man. The brand is, I'd like to call it like a cult favorite. When I've mentioned to a couple of people, funny enough, I didn't put this in any of the notes, but I was actually at an event, a tiki event here. It's Permanent Vacations, a local bar, and I met a rep from Ron del Barrilito there, and I saw it on his shirt. And I was like, "Hey, I'm actually going to be interviewing Eduardo." So he wanted me to stress to you that he was doing his job. I'll tell you his name later. Don't want to put him on blast like that, but it was like you could tell so many people there were enjoying your rum. The brand itself has always been something I've seen. My fiance used to work at a place that sold it, and that's where I ended up trying it the first time. Often spoken about like the cognac of the Caribbean, which is a weird take. Is that how you kind of see the brand and everything else that's kind of the flavor profiles and everything for those who've never tried it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it goes back to the history of when Barrilito started. So Pedro Fernandez, who started the brand back in 1880, before coming back to the Hacienda, he was living and studying over in Paris, where he was studying chemical engineering, learning about different techniques and different spirits that they had over there at the time, in particular cognac, as you mentioned. And he brought that back with him to Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico, predominantly a sugarcane market. He started tinkering around with some of that. And before you know it, he had a rum blend, which he originally, believe it or not, thought of as cognac and labeled it as cognac until, categorically enough, he realized it was rum. And so a lot of those influences that we see in our process still to this day tie back to those, 1800s roots, a lot of which, I mean, they're impossible to come by nowadays in modern day spirits. So, it's something that people try for the first time and their initial reaction is, wait a minute, this is not a rum, which I like to see. It opens doors to maybe consumers who thought they knew what rum is and kind of categorized it as, oh, rum is what you mix with Coke, or rum is what I taste in my sugary pina colada, which is certainly accurate. And there's all types of rums, but that's the beauty of it. There's all types of rums. And in this case, Barrilito has that profile where it kind of compares more to a bourbon or a scotch in terms of that maturity, that boldness, that age and barrel profile that comes out in the product. So again, there's a lot of different factors that come together, and that's what makes Barrilito so unique, to be honest.
Yeah. You mentioned it real briefly about the secret sauce for your production, right? So what makes your brand different is maceration versus distilling. I'll allow you to kind of elaborate on that, as well as the aging process. Do you mind giving us more information?
Yeah, of course. So again, start to finish, our process is unique, and we'll start with the distillation. And all of our distillation is conducted by our master blender and the team. They have very specific parameters that they look for in terms of getting that initial distillate. And then we get into what we call our transformation process, which just a few more unique indicators of what our brand is. And it starts with that maceration. Maceration is quite literally an ancient technique. And, I don't want to disrespect the 1800s, but definitely ancient for our times, in the sense of very similar to like a botanical process. But in this sense, they would take the base distillate and add it to different tanks. So tanks meaning wooden tanks, so similar to aging. Mm-hmm. And in each of these wooden tanks, they would add a specific fruit, a specific, I want to call it a spice, different ingredients from all over the world. And for a long time from here in Puerto Rico. So I'm talking about oranges, plums, apricots, bananas, whatever it may be. And each of these tanks, which we use around more than 25, had that distillate plus the fruit. And over months, it would what we call macerate and transform. Now, all these macerates would be taken in very small proportions and added to the base distillate. And so I say this, but all of these macerates combined make up less than 1.5% of the total base distillate that ends up going into barreling. Mm-hmm. But still, it's a very unique, time-consuming, expensive process, but adds just enough of differentiation that people do pick up on it. And if you come, walk through our barrel warehouses, you do pick up those notes of apricots or plums or different fruits that, in essence, are part of the base liquid that we use.
Go on. That's
the maceration. No, you're all good. Maceration is step one. I mean, I could go on it for hours. You put our production team on this call and, we'd have to make this a week-long series here. But, it's funny because it's such a unique process. It hasn't gone away. It's one that people look at and, they say, for 1% of the liquid prior to aging, is this really even necessary? And in our case, yes, we don't want to change. It's the way that it was done. It doesn't change the categorization of this brand in terms of being a spiced rum. It doesn't change it to be a flavored rum. It's all well below the minimums. And not only that, it's done prior to aging and with all natural ingredients. So, it's really something pretty unique to our process. We continue to do it, and it continues to be a secret. The only ones who know the exact proportions, the exact macerates that we use are the production team. So, all power to them. I don't even get involved in that business. I let them do their thing. And so, again, that's maceration. Then we move to, once we have all that married together, then we go into barrel aging. So in our case, all of our barrels are 500-liter ex-oloroso sherry aged casks that come over from Spain. Mm-hmm. Again, another element that in today's day and age, those barrels are hard to come by. Yeah. They're substantially more expensive. They already have some wear and tear on them. So again, it's part of the process. This was something that, Don Pedro learned about when he was over in Europe. He tried different sherries. He tried different spirits and said, this is the kind of barrel I want. So every single barrel you'll see here at the Hacienda, previously aged oloroso sherry over in Spain. I make that distinction because this is not a sherry finish. This isn't the last 2 months in a sherry barrel or, touched a piece of sherry and all of a sudden, let me slap it on the label. Yeah. This is from the beginning to end, it's aging in those ex-sherry barrels. A huge, huge a factor in what is the ultimate final taste profile of Barrilito. And so again, that factor combined with no Solera aging.
Mhm.
So, we're not opening and refilling and emptying barrels and refilling it with fresh rum. We leave the barrel, and when it's ready to empty and be part of a blend, it's coming all the way out and it gets blended with the other products. So, it's a big factor in the sense of, our barrels age, they start to finish. Each barrel has its unique properties, its unique life, its unique flavor. And once it's ready, it's ready. It's not so much about age statements and claims. It's more when the product comes together. For example, for our Barrilito 3 stars, it matches that profile that the last batch did 2 months ago. And the same batch from 5 years ago tasted exactly the same, and so on and so on. So again, it's this art of combining different aged rums in a way where you get consistency every single batch going forward and going backward.
That's it's a very painstaking process, it sounds like, but it shows through in the product for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And there's even, I might even add, now we're getting into nitty gritty, but all of our aging is goes into the barrel slightly over bottle proof. So not the conventional, let me age at 95% ABV so that once it's all said and done after 5 years, I down it with water and all of a sudden I have double the yield, right?
Mhm.
The Fernandez family always believed I want whatever's going into the barrel to be almost exactly what comes out of it. Obviously, there's some skews with, ABV loss or gain over time. But in this case, they want it to be so, so similar. And when it comes out, they have to slightly proof up or down to get to that 86 proof or 43% ABV. And not to mention the water that is used in that proofing is all naturally collected here at the Hacienda. So
Mhm.
here in Bayamon, where we are, there's a saying que en Bayamón llueve todos los días, which translates to in Bayamón, it rains every day. I can look out the window and confirm that. So it's a blessing for us. We use that water, put it back into our process.
Yeah, that I was about to touch on that too, especially when started talking about the difference in the rums. For anyone who has seen those rums and actually the background of your image, there's a star system. And kind of navigating that, do you mind kind of speaking to what the differences are between the 2-star, 3-star, 4, and 5 when you and what that process and prioritization of how you want that finish to end up? I know that was a lot of question, but yeah.
No, I got it. Followed.
Perfect.
So yeah, here at Barrilito, we have 4 rums, which we call the stars. The first is the 2 stars. That's our youngest blend. That is rums blended between 3 up to 5 years aged. And this is our youngest rum overall. This is a rum that, believe it or not, was born due to prohibition. And after prohibition was repealed, and the Fernandez family could fortunately get back into the rum making world after already having been in it for 50 years, they decided to release a younger rum and one that could enter the market a little bit quicker, enter in what was that cocktail boom that was going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2 stars has a lot more of those fruity notes that you might pick up from, for example, Maceration.
Yeah.
These combine better when mixing it, with whatever it may be, with juices, which, more refreshing cocktails, and, kind of carved out its place in the rum world. Again, 3 to 5 years is a long time. We take it for granted, but that's a long time for aging. So that kind of solidifies itself as our youngest rum. Next, and definitely most importantly, is the 3-star rum. So the 3-star is the original from Paris, tinkered around and made his little barrel or Ron del Barrilito that had a special rum in it. That was the 3 stars. And the 3 stars is a blend between 6 up to 10 years aged. So a little bit of everything in between there. And again, it is definitely one of the most well-rounded products that we have in our portfolio, just because that age range between 6 to 10, let's call it fruitier, more natural flavors from the maceration. But once you get into that 8, 9, 10 year old range, a lot more of the sherry elements come out from the barrel, that woodiness, and you just combine these things together and it makes a completely fantastic rum. As we mentioned, it's just so unique compared to other rums and the rest of the industry in general. So that's our 3 star. It does everything. It's versatile. You can drink it in any which way, which, we can discuss later, especially if we're willing to shake up a little bit on this show, but we'll leave that for the after hours,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And then we have the 4 and the 5, which again, those are our premium line offerings. We released them in the last few years, kind of just taking advantage of the fact that we do have 20-year, 30-year, 40-year aged rum sitting in our warehouses, and we said, let's put these to use. Let's make sure that we have an offering, in that 15 to 20-year range, and then up to 35 years. So really some crown jewels of the portfolio, unheard of in most of the rum world. Just getting to that point in a barrel is very, very difficult.
That is wild. Did you say 30-year rum?
Oh yeah. If I walk you through some of our warehouses, you'll have to double take at the year. Wait a minute. You do the math, the mental math. Not to make us feel old, but the 80s were 40 years ago. So
my birthday was just Saturday, so I'm gonna need you to stop.
But I won't ask the year. Don't worry.
No, exactly. Let's not do that. But I do live in Florida, so if you ever need someone to just try stuff out, you let me know. I could fly to Puerto Rico pretty easily.
Come on down.
So with these, with all this like wide variety, I'm gonna assume that your favorite sipper is the 3-star, correct?
Depends on the day, but 3-star is certainly at the top of my list, right now, and in the minds of a lot of people here, especially in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that is I've only had the 3-star. Won't even lie to you. I didn't even know you had a 30-year one until today. So definitely something, maybe one day one could dream. Earlier you spoke about the Freedom Barrel. What's the legend? Tell us about this legendary barrel from 1942 sitting in Hacienda Santa Ana that could only be opened when Puerto Rico becomes independent. Is this true or is this a myth?
A little bit of everything. It definitely has its merit. So the family that started this brand, the Fernandez family, they were as original to Puerto Rico as it gets. They immigrated from Spain. They settled down here. They started making their business here, especially in the sugarcane world. Funny enough, one of the first Fernandez family members that came over to Puerto Rico was I don't want to say the word, but he was a privateer. In other words, he was a pirate. So he definitely lived up to the whole rum name. He was a privateer for the Spanish Navy, and as a reward, he was compensated with this little plot of land that would end up being the Hacienda Santa Ana. And so, going forward, they were very, very tied to Puerto Rico culturally. They fought for Puerto Rico. They believed in Puerto Rico. They lived and breathed it to this day. They were not going anywhere. So along the line there in the 1900s, one of the family members set aside this barrel in their new warehouses with the whole claim of once Puerto Rico is liberated and free and, unchained and unbound, we will take this barrel to the middle of the town square, open it for everyone to enjoy. So that's the story as it goes. I can't attest to it. I was unfortunately not around in the 1940s, but yeah, allegedly. And, it makes a nice story. The family's very tied to Puerto Rico. I could 100% see this being the case. They were all about it. They represent it. They put it very proudly on the bottle's label. They want everyone to know who they are, where they're from, and that being part of history makes a special little tale. But that barrel is definitely there. It's definitely been aging for its almost 80 years and will continue to do so.
That's wild. 80 years. That's awesome to see too. That should be something for everyone's bucket list if you're visiting Puerto Rico, to go see that barrel at least. I want to circle back a little bit about the 30-year-old rum that you have. I know that you spoke about the Selection 3 30-year-old. In the Caribbean heat, I'm assuming that angel share and that loss is high. How much rum is actually left in a normal sized barrel is this when you finally crack it open?
Yeah, that's a great observation, and it is very much true. The Caribbean heat and humidity is a real factor. It makes a big difference. And just in the first few years, so when you look at, for example, 3-stars, which takes 6-year-old rum as the youngest, getting to 6 years, you can lose almost 35% of what goes into that barrel. So, losing that much is a big deal, especially in the first years. The math goes somewhere around 8 to 10% in the first year, and then around 5 to 6% every year after that. So again, you don't have to be a math major to do the math and say getting to 30 years is frankly, almost impossible. And it is very much the case. So the unfortunate reality is that most of these barrels, after they turn 20 years old, you open them up and they'll be empty. They'll be empty, or what's left in them is not usable. Just because that's the factor of time and the factor of every barrel being unique, and different elements of air and wood and how compact that wood is, where the barrel is in our aging warehouse. So are they up top in the racks, or are they down low? Up top can be 30 degrees more Fahrenheit than the bottom racks, on any given day. So these factors come into play. When we do get into these 25-plus-year-old barrels that still have substantial rum left in them, we almost refer to them as like the unicorn barrels. They're something magical happened, that they're not evaporating as fast. The barrel's more compact. They've just preserved over time. So, like I always tell people, let's say you and me put down 100 barrels today. We fill them and we leave them and we come check on them in 25 years. Chances are 95 of those either will be close to empty or have evolved in a way that's not as enjoyable, just because that's how, evolution of spirits go. And so those 5 that remain, we're able to take that 5, amplified by, a few more scales, and create what is the 4-star and the 5-star.
That is, I remember having this conversation with a couple of friends as they were learning to navigate the spirits industry, and just the thought process between the terms angel share versus devil's cut and all that, and telling them, especially, I've been fortunate enough to visit a couple of distilleries in my existence, and happen to be a guy who just drinks a lot, so I read the back. And we talked about the angel share and devil's cut and how much is lost, because there was a lot of questions from my friend, like the people I was discussing this with, about the value of it. And I had to tell them, I was like, there's a good amount of time that people who are putting these barrels together and putting the spirit in the barrel might not even get to try it. Like, this is an investment that you have no idea how this is going to pay off until well into someone else's lifetime, possibly to someone else's lifetime, if the age statement's old enough. So that makes so much more sense why it becomes that unicorn. And well, obviously this is for the master distiller, but I don't know if you're aware, if they found a way to kind of have a technique to maintain that value and stuff.
It's tricky. Yeah. I mean, it's there's certain factors that are in our control. Mm-hmm. For example, all these, and I can say all these barrels that do reach past 25 years and have rum in it that can be used or can be utilized in a blend, they're all on the lower racks. So as close to the ground as possible, a little bit less humid, definitely less heat, and it is extremely noticeable when it comes to opening up these barrels and seeing how much is left, how has it evolved. So that's one factor we can control. We're not putting AC in our warehouses. We're not, bubble wrapping these barrels. So other than that, it's time. And like I mentioned, most of these barrels that reach these ages, on a good day, they'll have 30% left when we open them up. Yeah. That's miraculous. And we're able to salvage that. Yeah, that's a huge win. We're able to take that rum, combine it with other barrels similar ages, and just like the blend of 2 stars, which is 3 to 5 years, and 3 stars, which is 6 to 10 years. When it comes to 4 or 5 stars, we're talking about blends between 25 to 35 years, or 15 to 20 years. Some really special rums that go in there. You speak to our master blender's been all over the world with any brand you can imagine. He's helped set up a lot of the brands that you and I have come to know and love and drink. And he'll tell you, making the 5-star was one of the most challenging projects of his career. Challenging and rewarding in the sense that there's so many bold flavors. Every time you tap into a new barrel and you taste it and you go, how am I going to combine this with another one? You have to go back to the drawing board and say, wow, this one's so impactful with XYZ, whether it's wood, whether it's sherry, whether it's, just dryness, bitterness. And he has to take so many and combine them. And when he brought them together to make what is the 5 stars, it was just a huge sense of accomplishment, and definitely shouldn't be taken for granted, because it's a lot like painting a very complex photo with a million different bases for, paint and crayons and this and that. And, you have to bring them together to create something beautiful. So that's definitely a cool story.
Yeah. It's a combination of a lot of techniques and knowledge, right? Kind of forward thinking as well. I was going to joke about superstition, putting it near coqui, little frogs everywhere. Like, but yeah, I'm sure that takes that time and effort. And of course, we'll talk about those brands that he's worked with later on, because that all that expertise has to lend into doing this well. Earlier, you talked about the distillate. So the base spirit. I like to joke about this because when I did the research, some of it being from Dominican Republic.
So the sugarcane industry in Puerto Rico, unfortunately, has been one of those that has ceased to continue here.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of factors that have led to that. Originally, the Fernandez family, again, I mentioned it, they had one of the largest sugarcane estates on the island, and they were able to be extremely self-sufficient. They distilled, they did everything here on site. But as that industry went away, they started producing it offsite. So the next closest island here, which is the Dominican, they have all the same variants and all the same, let's call it classifications that we need here for the same formula. So our master blender team and master distiller, what he does is he goes over there. He has his offsite distillation. He gets to choose even more ingredients that we would have been able to do so here, and create the exact distillate and distill over there and create the exact distillate that we need. He'll bring it over and make sure that we're starting from the exact same and correct page when it comes to just replicating a brand that's been doing it for 150 years. It's hard to go changing. You can't take the brand and then tomorrow say, new bold flavor. It doesn't work that way. This is something that the guy who tries it today should be able to open up a bottle from 30 years ago and say, yeah, this is the same stuff.
Oh, 1,000%. It's just I'm Dominican, so I like to say, I'm like, that's part of the reason why I enjoy this so much.
There you go.
But no, that's one of the things I appreciate about your brand is that you stay true to the legacy and the way they do things and the way they produced it, and you wanted to maintain that. The new bold flavors will tell you why Coca-Cola had to go back to the original formula. Some people don't like change. People like what they tried true, but the reason why it's so successful was because it was delicious. So why change? Why fix what's not broken? I think that's beautiful that you also pay homage to all that history. So definitely. Yeah. And I have to ask you, sorry, but why marketing and not a master distiller? Like, there's a part of me that wonders, like, why that choice in career path?
Well, look, I'm very fortunate. I mentioned it that I get to work with other family members here, and I went down the route of mechanical engineering, sales management. So I found myself on this side of the business. But fortunately for me, I have a brother, and he studied chemical engineering, and he works here with us. And he is definitely very much on the master distiller side. He's been here for almost 10 years as well, kind of learning under our seasoned veteran over here, Luis Planas, and he takes care of that side. I take care of this side. We come together and we make sure that you get the bottle that you want in the right place, in the right time, and the right way.
Oh, absolutely. I like that. I love the fact that the family dynamic has lent itself to being a successful business, right? That's important. Having people that are as passionate about it as you are.
Look, that's the family that I was raised in. That's what, has made me a 6th-generation family member of a rum producing family. You have to work together. You have to work with family. You have to respect the roots and know where you came from to know where you're going. And in our case, I appreciate about it every single day. I'm proud to represent both my family and this brand as well, because they're so unique. They're so different. And I think both in their own way help elevate what is the rum category.
Yeah, I think it's important. Every time, and I hate to see it, whenever we see brands go a little too step away from the tradition that made them good, you could kind of tell. And as a consumer, like, things change, and you can believe there's a lot of people like, oh, you can't really tell the difference. You can. Like, you can. You really can. Yeah. If you enjoy spirit enough and you're not just covered in sugar water, you 100% can tell. And your spirit has been quoted as a sipper, one of the best sipping rums. So for those who haven't tried it, definitely try it that way. Earlier, you spoke about the visitor center. So obviously, when we get off the phone, we'll work out the details. But tell us about the visitor center. I've seen footage online about the visitor center. It looks gorgeous. Always looks incredibly cinematic. It was kind of a hidden secret. What was it hard to open doors to the public and tell us a little bit about what people would see and this whole losing the mysterious vibe of only been seen on film?
Yeah. So again, this brand up until around 8-9 years ago was very mysterious. Like you opened with, it was a brand that the only info you can get on it was what you read on the back label. And it was, that's what you get. That's what you know. If you happen to run into someone from the Fernandez family out in the street, you stop them, pick their brain, and that's about it. There was no website, there was no socials whatsoever. The gates to come into, what was a distillery were closed. This was a house. This was a estate with a home where the family lived, their distillery, their aging warehouse, and that's it. So they would literally wake up, walk downstairs, and they're at work. So again, that was until around 8 years ago. We came into the picture, we being, myself, my brother, and some other industry people that have helped to kind of bring this up to speed and into the light of what other people should see and know and taste a brand that has been so mysterious for years. And when we did so, we started adding socials, we added a website, we added just general information so people could learn and say, I don't just like the product, I like what it's about, I like the history, I like what goes into it. And as part of that, we opened up the Hacienda. It's a beautiful Hacienda. It's an estate that is historic. It has some landmarks that date back to the early 1800s and late 1700s. And we wanted to give, consumers and historians and whoever wanted to learn, visitors a chance to experience it. So we took one of the warehouses that was kind of used for storing miscellaneous, and it had already been pretty much destroyed after Hurricane Maria. And we transformed it into our visitor center. And our visitor center has been, I can't speak enough about it. I think it's a testament to how curious and how people want to learn. They want to learn about brands. They want to learn about history. Yeah. And they come here, by the hundreds per day, and they want to learn more and more and more. And our visitor center is a complete experience revolving around education. All the tours that come through here do a 30-minute heritage tour, as we like to call it. So a historical tour. They walk through the original 1700s home. They see all the artifacts that are still there. So all the furniture, the beds, the ledgers that the family used to use. Then they walk over to our warehouses. They walk through our warehouses. They walk through our bottling line. They see, they touch, they feel, they smell the barrels, and, brings it to life. And they say, wow, this is real. Mm-hmm. And so that's the historical part. And then we also have a 30-minute edition, which our bestseller, and to me, the most impactful, is our tasting. It's 30 minutes where you sit down with a brand specialist and they'll guide you through a tasting of these rums that I have here. So 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars. It's an eye-opening experience. People try it, and like I mentioned, they go, wow, this is not what I remember being rum. This is something else. This is something so unique. And they fall in love with it, And so that's the experience that we have that we love to showcase. We also have a mixology experience. So for 30 minutes, you get to prepare, learn how to make it, shake, get very hands-on. You make 3 classic cocktails with Barrilito. You have fun, you make noise, you get to drink some of your own creation. So, you combine all those things with the experience we have there. We have a bar, we have a store, but honestly, what it's all about is education. And, when we have now almost 50,000 people coming through our doors on an annual basis, we see it as 50,000 brand ambassadors that are going back into the market. They're preaching to the choir. They're talking about the rum. They go find it. So again, that's what we want to create. It's a special experience. It's one that fortunately I get to go downstairs and see it every single day and meet people and talk to people and learn so much about the industry and what's going on and what they're looking for. And, I'm happy that we're able to make that become a reality.
Awesome. You said that they get to make their own drinks. What are the cocktails they end up making?
We rotate them by season. And right now we have our handshaken piña colada, which
I love those.
None of that frozen stuff. This is how the original piña colada was made, handshaken, and anyone tries it and it will never go back to the frozen piña colada.
Agreed.
We have our classic old fashioned. So the old fashioned, which is a staple here at our visitor center. Simple, elegant, easy to make, and just it will take you by surprise with how good it is. And then we have the last one, which is a seasonal cocktail. We'll change it around depending, usually a Hacienda creation of our own, which we'll usually use some kind of natural juice or whatever the season is that we can get our hands on and, teach people new classics.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. To be honest, that's one of the things that have always attracted to me to the distilleries. We've gone to breweries, all that, just tasting and getting to try things out. I like the fact that you throw in the mixology experience at the end, because even though the rum is a sipper rum, a lot of people do enjoy a cocktail. So it gives people an idea of what you could do with it, and not just closed to only, hey, this is all I could do. A daiquiri and a pina colada, like you said. So opens up that little bit of like ideas so you can mess with them.
For sure. We see it all the time. We have a bar here, and some of the best mixologists in Puerto Rico, run our bar, and they do an amazing job, and they're just constantly championing the brand and creating some amazing drinks. So the good part of my job is every Friday I get to go do some R&D down there, and
R&D.
tell me what's new. What are we making now? So the 3 stars, it's so versatile. I mentioned it as a sipper or on the rocks. It is just you can have that for the rest of your life and be happy. But at the same time, it has that profile, similar to a bourbon, similar to a mature Scotch, that you can substitute it in many classic cocktails where you might see that. So that's why the old fashioned, we say it and people, oh, old fashioned is that's a whiskey cocktail. That's a bourbon cocktail. It's like, yeah, but give it a try. And, funny enough, we've had this visitor center open for almost 7 years now. And the number one cocktail that we sell on a monthly basis, I don't think it's been dethroned for the last 90 months, is the Barrilito Old Fashioned. And it's become a movement here in Puerto Rico. People gravitated towards it, and just, it expands the horizons of what people think of for rum, which is exactly what we want. Not only we, but I think the rum category in general, producers, we want people to see, wow, this is so versatile. This is so unique. I tried this one versus this one, and they're so different. Each has their use case. So, we're excited to see that come to life. It's a great way to turn people onto the brand.
I love that, because I 100% agree. Anytime that I've tried to introduce my significant other or a friend to a spirit that might intimidate them, I always start with an approachable cocktail, because I think that opens up their mind and their taste buds to something different. So definitely love that. That's a brilliant strategy, and it's fun. People like to get their hands dirty.
It's fun. Again, the 3 stars, some people hear and they're like, oh, I would never put in a cocktail, but you know what? I always say a good cocktail starts with a good spirit. And in the case of an old fashioned, you can make a Manhattan, even a daiquiri for the most part. You have a good, solid, spirit there at the base. And some of these cocktails that are very spirit forward, spirit forward. You want the spirit to be there. You want it to be present. You want it to taste good. It's not every cocktail is doused in sugar and juice and Coke, and power to those. There's a time and a place for all those, and I know you and me can definitely agree. There has been, and there will continue to be. Yeah, right.
There's always been. I would be a liar if I said I didn't enjoy a sugary cocktail back in the day.
Exactly. We've been there. We've been there. So when you get a spirit forward cocktail and you put a good spirit in there, Barrilito, especially the 3 stars, will shine any day of the week.
That's awesome. Definitely going to have some fun with the spirits this week, especially things are settling down. So I'll probably be posting some cocktails with your spirit this week, if not in the next week. So I know you have a lot of stuff, exciting things going on. A couple of things I do want to ask before we even get close to signing off, to my favorite questions to ask guests, right? If you could enjoy your 5-star with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be?
That is a great question, and the first time I've been asked.
Really?
Can I give you 2 answers?
Go ahead.
All right. I got it out of you. I would have it with Pedro Fernandez. So the gentleman who started this brand, and I've been fortunate enough to meet his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, that I've gotten to work with, but I never got to meet him, of course. And he's the one who started this. I would love to see what he thinks of where this brand is, the reception it's received, and how people have come to love it even 150 years later. So definitely with him. And that's to my left. And to my right, I would do the same, but with my great grandfather, I guess, who started my family business, Bacardi, back in Cuba in 1862. So I would love to sit with both of them, kind of pick their brains, same time, know and see what they feel about today's day and age and how their brands and their legacies have lived on. I mean, I can't name many brands that have, even 100 years of history that continue to be doing the same thing today. So getting 2 of those founders together, with me, I'd be More than honored. I probably wouldn't even do talking. I would just listen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, that's gonna have to be an intense conversation. Just like just sitting there,
Oh yeah,
taking it all in, all the knowledge, all the experience, and probably have some techniques that we don't even know about, right?
oh yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. All right, all right. My last question. This is one of my favorites. Is what is your deathbed cocktail? It can or doesn't have to involve your rum.
That is a good question. Whatever gives me another 10 years of life, give it to me. No, in all seriousness, I honestly, this is gonna ruffle some feathers here, but I'm gonna
Oh,
say the 4 stars on the rocks. And I say it's gonna ruffle feathers because it's not available in the US. It's not available many places. You can only get it here in the visitor center. This is not a sales pitch, and this is not a
oh,
hashtag ad.
how are you gonna
It's
hurt me with
just
this?
it's just such a good product. I mean, we mentioned of like that age range of when those rums just peak. And to me, the 4 stars around that 20-year mark, I mean, there's nothing better. It's just, you have one of those and you're never looking back.
Not even a cocktail, just a nice
Oh, yeah.
pour of that.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Okay.
straight to the point.
All
I'm
right.
straight to the
All right.
point.
Not a sales pitch, but 100%
No.
nothing we could try. You see this, Eduardo? I thought we were going.
Hey, try. If you want, look, I'll give you something.
Yeah.
A 4 stars Manhattan, which a huge favorite. I've tried it. And if I was dying tomorrow, yeah,
I like
give
it.
me one of those.
I like both answers, perfectly acceptable. Just I can't replicate those here. So awesome.
We'll make that happen. Don't worry. Just send me your address.
All right, we'll do.
You have it on record now, so we'll make sure that happens.
We have it. You guys seen it here. I'm gonna try that out.
You heard it
You
here
heard it here
first.
first. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you in advance. Any new selections? Anything new releases that we should be excited for, or looking for? Limited editions people should be keeping an eye out. Aside from the one that I'm getting, because no one else will have it. Yeah.
That one signed bottle. Look, our star, our star lineup, it's done. We have 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've fortunately been able to play around a little bit in what is that 5+ range, and in what we call our single cask series. This is something we don't make a lot of noise about, just for the sake of, again, keeping it under wraps / inventory is so limited.
Yeah.
But, it got to a point when, people love blends. The beautiful part about blends, which is all our star system, is that our solar system, our star system, is that the blend brings out the best in everything. So you're not going to be super sharp into the bitter side or very woody. It's very well rounded. That's why our products are, every time we make a batch, they're blended and they have that well-roundedness that you can replicate year in and year out. But some connoisseurs just fall in love with that single barrel nature of, let me just pop open a barrel. If it tastes good, I want it. Don't change it. Don't proof it up. Don't proof it down. Don't add anything. Just give it to me out of the barrel. And that started a few years ago, that we had a few people interested in those, and private collectors would come and buy a barrel and would say, all right, feel free. At the end of the day, I'd rather it go into the hands of a connoisseur and someone who's going to enjoy it, rather than just the hands of the angels or the devils, as we spoke about earlier. And so this program, we brought it into action around 2.5 years ago, and we launched our first single barrel, which was only available here at the visitor center. We call it the Pedro Fernandez Selection Series, and it was selection number 1. 143 bottles, aged 32 years, around 44 point something percent ABV, straight out the barrel. And 3 months later, gone. Just here at the visitor center. People love it. People love the idea of a single barrel. I'm here today. If I come back in a month, there might be none left. 143 bottles go very fast. And just like that, people fell in love with the program. We launched our second one here at the visitor center around a year ago, and we have, I think, single-digit bottles left, probably hidden somewhere. And just recently in the US, we launched what is selection number 3. So the US, of course, we hear you guys. We hear you guys. We had the first 2 were down here, and so we selected and launched PF Selection 3, which is US exclusive, and it's making its way into market as we speak. Extremely limited, 186 bottles, you divide it up against amongst some of these major markets, and it goes fast. So we're super excited to have been launched. It's a 1994 31-year-old barrel that, again, these are not just, pick one out of a hat. These are barrels that our master blender has had his eye on for many years. And he says, I'm keeping this. And all right, ready to go. And let's put it in a bottle, because you miss that window and you might not have it tomorrow. So, that's of the new stuff that's going on. And again, just really hitting that super premium ceiling of making sure that we get the rum category in the right light. We want people to turn on to this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you 100% right to hit on that kind of market. People are always looking for the super premiums, the exclusives, the hard to find. And there's a little bit of like the hunt beauty to people, with some people where it's like, oh my God, I got an exclusive and got to try something that no one will ever get to try, or rarely anyone could ever try. I just like to drink. So it's not necessarily about, but that's awesome to know that is something that 186 bottles will probably go away in 35 minutes or less. So definitely something to keep an eye out for those hunting. Eduardo, it's been so much fun. Where can people find you? How can people support your brand? And from Ron del Barrilito, or literally translates to rum from the little barrel, where, go ahead and tell us where we can find you and what is on the horizon for us to keep an eye out for. Yeah,
thank you. We're growing pretty rapidly in the US. So, we're trying to be in every retailer that we can, definitely in the on-premise, wherever we can, especially like you mentioned, those consumers looking to learn more about our products, kind of explore different areas. We're there. We got the team heavily after it. You mentioned you saw some of our brand reps out there, and we're definitely there. And Puerto Rico, I mean, this is our home. Puerto Rico is making a lot of noise right now, thanks to guys like Benito and sure. All the accomplishments he's done. Complete shout out to him, as well as all the other Puerto Ricans who helped put our very small island on the map. We're here. We're part of its history. We want to continue to be part of its history, kind of illuminating. Look, this is an island that has a lot of really great things and really great products. And, I'm honored to be hopefully part of that category. And just, we're here. Anyone who hears this, if you come down to the visitor center, come down to Puerto Rico, come on over here. I will be more than happy to go down, have a drink with you, shake your hand, meet other people. Because honestly, that's how I grow. That's how I learn. That's how we as a brand continue to absorb and hear from the rest of you guys who, at the end of the day, without this community, this industry is non-existent. So
awesome. Well, we appreciate that. Trust me, and your hard work is noticed. And also the rep that we saw, his name is William. He's a good dude. So definitely represented your brand very well. So shout out to him. Everyone at home, if you want to continue supporting, make sure I will drop their in the show notes to make sure, and we'll tag them in the cocktails that we'll be making over the next couple of weeks. If you guys like their product, make sure to tag them if you go ahead and pour a sip of it. Like, subscribe, follow us at Last Call with Arthur. Looking forward to trying out these spirits. You already heard them. It's going to be a signed bottle, so mind your business. I'll tell you guys how that is. But shout out to everyone at home. Drink safe, drink responsibly, and enjoy some spirits with some friends and make some great memories. Eduardo, thank you again, and take care.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Arthur.
Of course. Thank you. Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Burn, Termite, and Pest Control. I first met Joe Byrne on Full Frontal Nerdity Show and decided to give his company a try. They have been the best pest service I've ever had, from flexible scheduling, attention to detail, fair pricing, and everything you love about a small business. I highly recommend Joe Byrne and Burn, Termite, and Pest Control. It's a family-owned and operated business with over 30 years of experience in termite and pest. You can reach Burn, Termite, and Pest Control at 321-297-7985. Once again, 321-297-7985. And let them know Bourbon and Bullshit sent you. Thanks, guys. See you next time.